My name's Alberto Carde, and I'm the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs. And I'd like to welcome all of you to the third of our Courageous Conversations. All lives can't matter unless Black lives matter. This has been a series of wide virtual open forums that we have sponsored in collaboration. It's been a collaborative effort between the Leading for Change Committee, the Center for Diversity and Inclusion, and with support from the Black Student Union, the Latin American Student Organization, the Office of Student Support, the Office of the Provost, Division of Student Affairs, and Human Resources in Payroll. On behalf of the three co-chairs of the Leading for Change group, myself, Dr. Laura Bayless, and Jess Murdoch, I want to welcome you to this third one, which builds upon the two forums that we had over the last 2 weeks. First one was on students focus, and the second one was on faculty and staff. Today, the idea is to bring us together and have a conversation to help us tie together what we have learned, the themes that have emerged as a result of those other two conversations, so that we can continue to build and take note of what is being said, with the hope and the expectation of developing a short-term plan that will be made available over the month of July to the campus, that in turn builds into and builds upon the strategic plan that clearly has on its focus the issues of equity and justice. I want to remind everyone that the meeting is being both streamed and recorded, and the reason being that for the purposes that I mentioned earlier, to keep a record so that we can build and help make those annotations of the comments and themes to help us develop our plan. We have asked Carl Bell to help us once again with the facilitation of the discussion that will follow. But first, we have asked our president, Dr. Richard Lapidus, to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about the perspective from the institution based on the discussions that have had for the last two on the last two forums, as well as some of the discussions on future plans. So we're happy that he was able to join us today and discuss the perspective of the university leadership. Dr. Lapidus.
Well, thank you, Alberto. For those of us that are actively engaged in public speaking, this is the reason why you never let anyone go before you, because they take many of your lines. But in any case, thank you for having me. This is, as Alberto said, this is the third of the series. I've had an opportunity to participate in a somewhat passive role in the first two. The participation in the first two, and judging from the numbers here that at least I can see in this third meeting, have been extraordinarily high, and I think that speaks to the engagement and the commitment of this campus towards anti-racism and the support of the Black Lives Matter movement. And so I'm certainly appreciative of that. And I too am committed to this cause and for taking this topic sort of head on and working through some of the issues as we move through the summer and into the fall. Similarly to Alberto, I want to thank the groups that have played a significant role in organizing this event: the Leading for Change group, Center for Diversity and Inclusiveness, and the many other groups on campus, student population that have participated in fleshing out the agenda and starting this conversation off and adding some important components to the understanding that will contribute to the development of planning moving forward. I'd also like to welcome Carl Bell back. He did a great job the last time, and I'm appreciative that he's been willing to and able to come back again. I recall at the end of the first session, he had indicated his willingness to come back. I don't see him on the screen yet. I'm not sure he was counting on the fact that he'd be back in a week, but nonetheless, thank you, Carl, for coming back. Really appreciate it. I thought you did a great moderating job, and looking forward to this session as well. In the conversations, I guess two other comments I would make is firstly, for those that have shared their thoughts, have expressed what are clearly emotionally charged experiences. I can't imagine how difficult that is sometimes to present that and really kind of lay your heart out there. And it does take a tremendous amount of courage, and I appreciate those that do that. And really found myself in a number of occasions really being quite touched by the comments that were being made, and that's really powerful. Additionally, for those that are just listening and trying to understand, there's tremendous value in that too. I think in the first session, one of our students, I think his name was Dimitri, he was quite well spoken, talked about the importance of just understanding. You know, we don't have to be able, and probably can't in many cases, relate to someone else's life, and probably inappropriate to try to do so. But trying to understand, and I think try to be a bit introspective as well as you hear some of these stories and comments. You know, I found myself, one, trying to understand, but two, also trying to put myself in a position where I'd ask myself, you know, is it, should I have known this? Should I have not have known that? Was I part of an interaction where perhaps I should have done something differently based upon what that person's experience was? And so I do think that there's a component of trying to relate, perhaps not relate to that person's life, but to relate to how you might have reacted or should have perhaps done something different relative to what was going down at the time. So overall, I think the conversations have been meaningful and powerful, and I hope you felt the same way. I've been thinking a lot about the anti-racism and Black Lives Matter movement as it's become much more prominent on the national stage, and certainly from these conversations. And you know, I can think of no better environment for us to be in than to have these conversations. If you think about the foundations of a university environment, I mean, what are they here for? They're here to have conversations like this. They are an opportunity for people to get together with diverse perspectives and share those perspectives, try to understand the other side. You know, I think that we're in a good position to try to tackle challenging topics. Of course, we want to be civil in the way that we do that, although I think sometimes it's okay to be a little agitated as well. But you know, to have the conversation and to be honest with one another, as long as we're respectful of one another, and I know that that's the way it will play out on the campus moving forward. I have always been, I think, or tried to be committed to this notion of equity and inclusion. Although perhaps now that I understand it a little bit better, perhaps a little naive in my understanding and how it was being presented. And so I do think that there is an opportunity for me to grow, as well as I hope you as well. I think that we all need to be committed to this. I think it's not enough to be just committed to the topics, but I think we have to be self-committed. We have to challenge ourselves. I think we have to take responsibility for our actions, our behaviors, our thoughts, our interactions with others. And I feel confident and comfortable with the people on this campus from how we've acted and behaved towards each other in the past, and I know that we can grow with this for the betterment. I can't go without noting the fact that after our first conversation, which I was feeling quite good about, that we turned around the next day with a racial slur incident on our campus and our buildings. I was pretty disturbed by that. I did send out a short memo to the campus expressing concern and disappointment for that. That's not who we are. That's not our value system. And I think it's important to emphasize that the campus is going to continue to take a no tolerance position on hateful actions. It's just not who we are. So we've been thinking about this, or I've been thinking about it a little bit. There's certainly been a very broad continuum of things that we've all been exposed to. On one hand, we've seen the murder of innocent people, the George Floyds and Elijah McClains of the world, that have really been quite horrific and upsetting. And then here we've listened to stories that are hurtful, but much more subtle. And so I've been trying to think a little bit, and I know others of you have, about how we start to think about programming and exercises to sort of tease out this broad continuum of things that are going on. It's complex, it's deep, it's not easy, but I think that they are conversations and activities certainly worth having. Many of you know that, and as Dr. Cardea said, the purpose of these meetings was to try to gain a sense, or a better sense of understanding, to help us gain a sense of what topics to broach first, how we might prioritize a very broad range of things. You do know that we have some activities going on. I'll share a few with you that you might or might not know, and then I hope that over the course of the next weeks we'll be able to aggregate more things that you share, more summary information from what these conversations have yielded as we start to put programming together. Dr. Cardea mentioned the strategic plan. I think that everyone's aware that educational justice was one of the key components of that plan. Equity, diversity, inclusion become important components under that general heading. It now is an opportunity for us to think about more specific tactical kinds of strategies that will allow us to operationalize those thoughts and move beyond just talking about them, but in fact putting them into play so that we can demonstrate some positive forward progress. Many of you have talked about continuing to work on diverse hiring of faculty, both staff and faculty. We have been doing that and will continue to do it. HR certainly advocates the broadest possible net when we search. We have failed searches for lack of diversity, and we will continue to work on that front. Not always as easy as it sounds, but we will continue to work. Leading for Change is reworking the campus climate survey. We've distributed that once, I think perhaps 2 years ago. We'll send it out again. We'll get a reassessment. We got that. I think the first climate survey gave us a little bit of a baseline, and now we'll see where we go with the next one, and perhaps it will emphasize some things that will help us to prioritize. The folks in academic affairs have been doing for a while now development day activities that have involved inclusive teaching. We've heard from faculty, we've heard from students on that point, and we will continue to put focus there. Students talked about on the first session a need to diversify programming a little bit, to provide greater guidance on courses and programs that focus on social and racial justice, that highlight Black and Latino authors and artists, to provide a broader perspective and understanding of the realities of our world, and we can certainly move in that direction as well. Student Affairs is giving serious evaluation of the Center for Diversity and Inclusiveness, and the things that are working well, the things that are not working well, how we move forward with that office, and so you can count on that moving in the fall as well. Bias response protocol, to think about bias-related, racially charged issues that keep cropping up, why, how we appropriately address them. And then a number of students have come to and talked to me about funding and support relative to events like Black History Month, Latinx Heritage Month, etc. And those are certainly things that we could put into play in the short term to start bringing greater focus and attention in those areas. So there's a lot to be done, clearly. A lot of good ideas kicked around. We certainly can't do them all in the short term, but there is now an opportunity for us to think very seriously about prioritizing things to move our campus in the right direction. So I'm going to stop there. I really want to, again, sort of take the role of a listener rather than just speaking to you. So let me kick this back over, I think, is it Alberto or Laura, to reintroduce Carl and move the program forward.
Yeah, it's to me. Thank you so much, Dr. Lapidus. I appreciate your commitment and leadership as we continue to hone the work that we're doing related to all of these topics and the energy that we need to create on it. I want to just highlight for folks that in July, there's going to be a publication of information that highlights the themes that have come out in these conversations and in other aspects that we know of, conversations with students, faculty, and staff in other venues, the climate survey, all of that highlights the themes and talks about the actions that we're taking in the short term, the actions that we're taking in the long term. And we will continue to also engage the community to help us prioritize what the long-term things are and what order they should be done, including how we design the strategic plan. So with that said, I am delighted to invite back Carl Bell, who did a wonderful job of facilitating an extraordinarily rich and brave conversation with our students a week ago. And let me just give you a little bit of information about him before I turn it over. So Carl V. Bell is the Associate Director for TRIO Student Support Services at Boston College. He has served in higher education for over 25 years in multiple roles, from admissions to academic advising, and from new student orientation to multicultural student affairs and to student activities. Carl is a third-year PhD student in the higher education program at the University of Massachusetts at Boston. And his research interests center on the socialization of Black male doctoral students and the effects of race and racism on educational outcomes. Apropos, don't you think? His professional interests include developing partnerships between academic and student affairs, something very close to my heart, and the creation of institutional support systems for Black males, low-income students, and first-generation students, also something close to my heart. So without further ado, Carl Bell.
Dr. Bayless, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lapidus and Dr. Cadea, for your leadership, and for all of you who are on the call and the chat this afternoon. I want to begin by talking through some conversation norms, and then we'll get into our focus for the afternoon and some more technical pieces. And so we shared these norms before. You may have heard them, so bear with me as we go through them. First and foremost, try on new ideas and new ways of thinking, right? We are not a monolithic we. We are a community of learners and leaders, and as a result, we are also committed to this initiative. But it's important for us, when we hear new things, to try them on versus deciding outright that they don't work for us. So in that regard, practice releasing judgment. It's not okay to judge yourself or others. It's okay to disagree with ideas, not people. Avoid shaming and blaming others and yourself. Please at all times respect confidentiality. For example, here, another story will always be their story. So simply because I'm sharing my story with you, that does not give you then license to share my story with others, especially not without asking my permission first. Practice self-awareness. Use I statements. Oftentimes in these conversations, I have the tendency of saying they, and want to make sure that the focus is internal, on I, me, my. So this is an opportunity for us all to be selfish in that regard. Be awareness of intention versus impact. Not everything that's said is intended to hurt feelings or to cause harm. It's okay not to have known. As I mentioned earlier, we are a community of leaders and learners. And as Dr. Lapidus said earlier, we're here to have these difficult conversations and to learn. Know when to step forward and when to step back. I'm one that loves to dominate the conversation and talk. And so I have to remind myself on occasion that listening is also leading. And so I encourage us all to lead through listening on the call this afternoon. Practice self-care. As we've said before, courageous conversations can also be difficult conversations. And so don't harm yourself by judging yourself or shaming yourself because you didn't know. Again, be open to learning and ideas. Listen to understand and not just to respond. Again, listen to understand, not just to respond. Oftentimes, it's difficult to hear someone's story and to understand it if we're not listening intentionally. And then finally, be guided by our collective values. Fitchburg State is a community of leaders and learners who share common goals and values. So I want us to be guided by those goals and values as we engage in this courageous conversation. As Dr. Cadea said, we've had several of these conversations over the last few weeks. And so this is our third such conversation. And so I want to begin by talking first and foremost about the two overarching questions that will guide our conversation. Those two questions are simply, to those that haven't shared just yet, with the current climate at hand, we would like to allow space for our students, faculty, staff, and alumni who haven't shared to this point to share. How are you feeling in this moment? What have the recent events brung up for you? And then the second question is, how can we each personally challenge ourselves individually challenges the institution, challenges the broader society in an effort to make our campus community a safer and more inclusive environment. So again, a quick recap. First, how are you feeling? What's going on with you? How are you practicing self-care in these very difficult times of anti-Blackness and COVID-19 and all the accompanying challenges that we have? And then secondarily, as we prepare to do the work that the president has called us to do, to move forward on this initiative, how can we each challenge ourselves individually, challenge the institution, those of our colleagues who aren't yet quite committed to this work, aren't quite in line with the direction of the university community and with the mandate of the president, to help our campus grow and to be better, to make it a safer community, to make it a more complete community, to make it a community of one versus thousands. So those are our overarching questions. Not all of us share in the same way. And so I want to highlight the chat function. And so if you're more of a quiet, you don't quite want to share on the call, feel free to add your question in the chat. There's a public chat, but there's also a private chat where if you have questions that you want to ask without being identified, you can share your question there and you won't be identified in any way. It's a private form and we won't be able to find out, oh, Carl Bell said X or Y, right? And so with that, let me again thank you all for being here, for engaging in this courageous conversation, and then start with our first question. For those of you that have not had a chance yet to share, given the current climate, we want to allow space for you to share what you're feeling, how you're feeling, and what's coming up for you. Thank you for sharing. One of the biggest challenges we have is making a mistake, saying the wrong thing. And so oftentimes anxiety comes quite naturally. We go back through our mental Rolodex and we try and figure out, have I said something? Did I do something? President Lapidus spoke to this. Could I have responded differently? What could I have done? And so I just want to call out that it's okay to be anxious. It's okay to be exhausted. That tells you that you're human. These are natural emotions. And so I would encourage all of us to embrace them.
Mr. Bell, this is Jessica Murdoch, our Associate Vice President for Human Resources. And I just posted that, I do feel very similar to Andrea, and I'm glad she was able to speak that, because I do think that often even a person in my role and the responsibilities in which we have is I do feel anxious sometimes, because I want to make sure that I'm meeting the needs of all of our staff and our faculty. And then how do they bring that back to the students? And so I think it would not be human to say that anxiousness or being afraid or being uncomfortable those are all the right words, I think, at this point in time in the nation and the current trends that we're seeing. And so I appreciate that people can reflect on that. So I guess more of a statement than anything, but I really do appreciate the conversation, because I think it really helps us understand that we all are cautious about how we move forward, but understand the importance of it. So I just want to thank my fellow community for that.
I just posted a comment that came in from the anonymous forum last week. I'm going to read it out loud in the event that our stream is working and we have folks in there. So from the anonymous forum, in our conversations last week, somebody submitted, faculty of color often feel like guests of the institution. We feel like we need to be on our best behavior as a precondition of being accepted into the institution. We don't feel at home or comfortable in our skin. We suffer from tremendous level of imposter syndrome. We don't have agency and no one has our backs. That is such a compelling description of how some of our colleagues are feeling at the institution. I wanted to make sure it was part of the discussion.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Bayless. And I would simply amplify that comment and say, no matter where you are at the university, no matter who you are at the university, you may absolutely share that exact sentiment. Dr. Parkinson also shared something from the anonymous forum. I never feel comfortable engaging in personal conversations, especially with students who are not always forthcoming. How can I try to reach out to them? Any thoughts about what might be done to reach out to students to engage in personal conversations?
Building on the work of, or wait, was someone else going to go?
Well, I was just going to say on that question, I was going to talk a little. I'm wondering if sometimes when working with students, and I look for my colleagues in student support and student affairs that work with students at a different level. If partially what helps is to, from the academic side, teach your class or present yourself in a position of vulnerability. And by that, I don't mean weakness, but of openness and being open to saying we don't know. And many times as faculty, we feel as we have to keep command of our classrooms based on our knowledge and expertise. But it's sometimes important to be vulnerable and say, no, well, this is an area, or this is an area that I don't understand how it affects you. And so I put that out there.
There's another comment from the chat that says simply, or a question from the chat, have we made progress in the last 150 years? Who wants to respond to that question?
I think it's a kind of loaded question, because obviously there has been some progression. There's been great progression. There's no, segregation anymore. But the protests we're seeing right now look exactly like the ones we saw in the 1960s. So it's happening, but it's slow moving. And it just feels like we have a very, very long way to go.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to respond, Jordan, and say simply, as I mentioned 2 weeks ago, so often we in higher education are uber focused on moving forward, that we oftentimes don't pause to reflect on, one, the progress that we've made and the progress that we're making. It is no small thing that there are over 100 people on this call right now who are committed to Fitchburg moving forward. This is progress. This is what progress looks like. So I love Martin Luther King Jr., and he has one of my favorite quotes. He says, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." And basically, I interpret that to mean each day we're making progress. We may not be able to see it. I referred last or 2 weeks ago to this notion of planting seeds. We are planting seeds and building trees that we won't have necessarily an opportunity to see grow. But we know now that we're doing the hard work. And so we should pause, absolutely, as a community and say, wow, we did that. We are doing that. We took time to move forward. And so, yes, oftentimes we can get caught up and say, well, no, we're not making any progress. We're not moving. We're not moving. We're not moving. Yes, you are. Other responses?
I still have in my head and in my heart that question about engaging with students in a real and authentic way. I thought Alberto's comment about bringing our own humility and vulnerability to the work is really important and not easy. The other piece is slowing down and truly being present and listening, actively listening. Dimitri, that President Lapidus referenced in the student conversation, was talking about that. It's like you need to actually really listen and try and understand, and that goes a long way. And if we try and engage each other, not only with students but with colleagues as well, as whole people, real people, and slow down, that may be a way where we can reach a more complex understanding of what everybody's lived experiences are. I know for me, it's relatively easy to focus on the task, and I care about the person as well and always deal with that, but sometimes it's a greater percentage on the task. And I remember one conversation I had with a student who came in for a very particular issue. I kind of knew what the steps were that needed to be taken, but I first acknowledged the complexity and the pain of the situation that she was in before we got down to the business. And she actually teared up and said, I've talked with so many people about this on campus, and you're the first one to acknowledge how hard it is and how painful it is. And then that helped us move to, yes, the task we would have gotten to anyway, but we had a really good conversation that helped me understand it much more complexly.
I shared this earlier, but I'll with the students, and I want to share it here again with all of you. First and foremost, please read along with the chat There are lots of very important, critically important information in the chat. But I want to tell a story about COVID-19. If you're like me, you were home from March 11th, 12th, or thereabouts until perhaps last week, except to run to the grocery store. Not a lot of conversation with friends or family, maintaining social distance. And I think for too often in our higher education community, we've approached our lives at the university as though it were COVID-19, as though we had to maintain some social distance. And we can see on our television screens that now that states are opening, folks are all over the place. They are in restaurants, on beaches, engaging in their church homes. And so I want to encourage us all to approach this conversation in a similar way. Let's treat this opportunity that we have as though it's an opportunity to leave our house for the first time in months. Let's engage strangers in our community for coffee. As a faculty member, as a leader on campus, I would encourage you to invite students, any students, once, twice a month for coffee. And the only caveat is they can't know you. It can't be a student that you had in class or a student that you engage with who's a work study student or a member of your staff already. It has to be a different student. And I want to deputize all of you in my Midwestern fashion to just meet a stranger every day, right? Engage them in a way that you wouldn't otherwise, and take the risk of sharing one thing with them as you are right now, right? And so through this Google Hangout, I can see inside your home or inside your office and get a sense of what books you read. And maybe you have a pre-programmed idea around what you're going to share. I'm going to share my pet's name because who doesn't love talking about their pet? I'm going to share my favorite 2 books, and I'm going to share a fear. That could be a fear of eating new foods, of running, but take some action to engage someone that you don't know in a way to be courageous. Start there. And before you know it, the student, the staff member will become a close friend. And then there you will sit in 2021 May as a student walks across the stage graduating, crying your eyes out, regretting the fact, yes, hopefully, crying your eyes out, regretting the fact that you didn't engage that student or staff member in their first year at the university. Let's begin now to talk about the tough work, right? That second question, that question where we can all engage, right? I want to reread the question here so that we all are aware of what we're talking about. And it's simply this. How can we each personally challenge ourselves, the institution, and the broader society to make our campus community a safer and more inclusive environment, right? So we're engaged personally, individually, focused on ourselves, the institution, society, all in an effort to make our Fitchburg State home a better home. I call this the work. So what work are you willing to do? And again, the chat is open. You can also share anonymously if you want.
Hi, Carl. Welcome back. Hank here. I think we all have to take responsibility in this work. And for me, I mentioned it the last time, is about educating, reading and learning, specifically for me around white fragility and white privilege, and what does it mean to be a true ally, and also a better understanding of what anti-racism is and how to be anti-racist. And then for the university, within my sphere of influence, and I'm already doing this work, working with Dr. Bayless and We are going to be we are taking a very close look at areas like, for instance, the Center for Diversity and Inclusiveness and the Office of Student Development, looking at policies and procedures through making sure that everything is fair, and pulling together students in particular. I work obviously directly with students, so continuing to work with the Black Student Union, Latin American Association, and others to listen to their feedback and where we can improve. And I think that as an administrator, I am committed, and I need to be committed to doing that work, and no matter how hard, now how long it is. And I think that as a university, I think we got to look at all sectors of our university and looking at it, because we know that racism is systemic, and that it is systemic within higher education. It was built, I think you talked 2 sessions ago about how this was put in place way before any of us, and it's up to us to unchange it. And I think in order to do that, we have to step up and we have to do the work. And so you asked the question, what are we doing personally? What am I doing? I'm personally going to, have been and will continue to step up to make positive changes and move us forward as an administrator here at university.
Hi, everybody. It's Laura Garofoli. I'd like to address some things that Jordan has been putting in the chat, and thank you so much, Jordan, for your continued participation. And I know you're exhausted, and all of our students of color are exhausted, and our faculty of color are exhausted, and it's hard to watch. It's hard to be a part of. And I hear you calling out and crying out, what are professors willing to do? And I want you to know that there are some of us who do call it out. We don't skate by these issues when they come up in class. I address them head on. I've had students, repeatedly say, damn, she went there. I did, and I do. And, it's important that we all develop the skills to be able to do that. And I know not everybody has that skill set, but as a university, we need to give people those tools and those skills to be able to address these issues when they arise in class, but also make them a part of class. It can't just be something that comes up because of a conversation that started before class, or, something that somebody said that was outrageous in the middle of class. It should be a regular part of our discourse on campus overall, because it is an integral part of student success at the individual level and at the campus level. And so please know that, there are professors who do fight for our students of color, and I protect my students of color the best ways that I know how to, but I'm also reading and watching and listening feverishly to make sure that I am continuing to develop my skills, not just for my own classroom, but so that I can help my colleagues too.
Laura, I want to thank Dr. Garofoli for saying that, because I take this very seriously, and it means a lot to me that I can learn more from our community. And my job at the university and my role at the university is to make sure that I am giving those tools that Laura just spoke about, and that I am helping to develop the language skills, the engagement skills, and empowering our faculty and staff to have these real conversations. And so I'm very committed in making that a priority, not that it hasn't been, but to create, continue to make that a priority. And I need to develop, and when I say I need, my team and others as part of the university, we need to create those safe spaces for these conversations. We need to create those forums where people can feel empowered to have those conversations in small groups and to get us where we need to be. I want to bring a person with more expertise. I am in no sense a chief diversity and inclusion officer, and I certainly respect that over the years, 10, 15 years now, diversity and inclusion has really become its own section and skill set that's necessary. And though it falls under the Human Resources Division, I want to bring in those experts and have those resources available so I can commit those strategies. And so I recognize that that needs to be done. And then I was very pleased from a colleague that shared beyond the modules of learning that we provide, as often universities do, is we provide these online tutorials and guides about how to make sure the people are getting the language. We have to do training that's weaved into the university. And I really felt empowered by that statement from a colleague. So it's really going beyond that. And so those are some of the promises that I would like to make to our staff and to our students and to our faculty, that I understand the role. And though it is heavy, I am certainly committed to doing that. So I just wanted to share my pieces.
I just wanted to, hi, I'm Kat. I coordinate the Academic Coaching and Tutoring Center. I just wanted to hop in for a second. So our center is in the process of inviting a diverse body of our students to advise us on policy. And we are trying to hit that balance between soliciting student experience as part of our policymaking process, but not overburdening our students, because I do also hear both students and faculty talking about the enormous amount of emotional labor. So we're trying to fold this into their job to make sure that we compensate them for their time as we compensate them for all their time as student employees. So I'm sure I'm going to make mistakes in that balance along the way. And my department, we just voted on a book to read together. So we chose So You Want to Talk About Race, and we're going to sort of sit down at our weekly meetings so we can just dig in and start thinking about these issues in a more overt and intentional way. So these are just our initial steps, and I'm sure there's so much more that we can learn and continue to do, but yeah, hopefully we're getting started.
I want to encourage you as a community as well to tell your story as a community. Oftentimes at the university, we operate in silos. So academic affairs is doing something that student affairs has no idea about. Our facilities folks are engaged in ways that we had no idea that they were engaged. And the same is true about Fitchburg State. Again, you're having this conversation, but who outside of your community knows that you're having the conversation? Right? Are you posting on your website on a regular basis what you're doing by way of this work? Or are you simply operating in silos and taking that approach, well, I don't want anyone to know. It's going to appear as though I'm bragging. Well, no, brag all you want. Feel free to brag. Because if you don't tell your story, it will not be told. And as a result, no one will be aware of the work, the phenomenal work that you're doing to transform Fitchburg State. And that's the tragedy in you being modest, right? That's the tragedy in you not telling your story. I can tell from the chat alone, this faculty academy that Danette Day mentioned, that's phenomenal work. Who knew about that before today? And if you knew about it, who did you tell? Right? So again, the community is doing some great work. Share that work with others. Let folks know what you're doing. And again, the question is, how can we each personally challenge ourselves, the institution, and the broader society to make our campus community a safer and more inclusive environment?
Carl, I just want to say something. It's Danette Day, and I'm reading Pam Boudreau's comment in the chat, and I have to speak up for this person. you said we need to feel safe, and she doesn't feel safe. And this has been a person who's been an ally to me since I stepped on this campus. And the skill set, the sensitivity that she brings, and the fact that she said that she doesn't feel safe, and her past experience has led her to understand that there are some places where she can speak and there's some places where she can't speak. I know that position. I know being someone that doesn't hold some, I have some power, right? I have some privilege, but that worries me. And I just wanted to acknowledge that somewhere along the line, we have created silos, not only within our disciplines, but even within the idea of employees, faculty, staff. And sometimes I wonder why we don't have professional development where we all come together. Like, let's shut the school down and do this development, right? Let's really create some equity and some equality and some moments where we can come together. And we did that once, I think, during the strategic planning, and it was really powerful. So I'd like to see more of that.
Thank you, Pam, for sharing that, and Dr. Day for lifting it up. Are there others that want to respond to this particular thread, this particular feeling of, I came to Fitchburg committed to speaking truth to power, perhaps, and I was burned by it. I was hurt by it. And as a result, I've been silenced. I want to lift up also that others who chimed into the chat from both the private forum and from the chat here that you can see to your right in the chat conversation, that they feel this way too. And so how do we move in a way at Fitchburg State that says we want to hear all voices? Perhaps the anonymous forum is live in perpetuity, and staff, faculty, students can share much along the lines of the work that you're doing with your bias reporting incident form. So that might be a way of thinking about how to do this work in an ongoing way, because I can only imagine what it must feel like to have that something boiling inside of you that you want to get out, but not have an outlet, right? Or not feel safe to do so. And that makes it difficult to then challenge ourselves and the institution to make our community a safer, more inclusive environment. If I'm feeling right now that it's not safe for me to speak up, I'm less likely to do so. And so I want to challenge our leaders to think about that. And I think this is coming not from a student perspective, but from a staff perspective, perhaps a faculty perspective. And so what might it look like for us as a community to honor all voices, be they aligned with our mission as a university or not? Because that too might be work that we can do to challenge ourselves. Are we ourselves a roadblock to this work? Right? How do we challenge ourselves to move differently through the university as we then prepare to challenge the institution to stretch itself and acknowledge that the university is doing some phenomenal work? Please don't let that go unnoticed and not acknowledged, because the university is doing phenomenal work. And yes, there's work to do. I want to speak lastly to Payne before we go back to this question. If you've been in your house for the last 6 weeks, that first time you get out to run 2 miles might be very painful. Your muscles have atrophied a little bit. That work, it's not accustomed to doing that work, right? Or lifting that weight. And now you go back and you realize that you've not made progress, right? And so oftentimes the work can cause pain. Now, I'm not trying to equate silencing to working out. I'm simply saying this work is difficult work and it can't go undone. Unless you have thankfully you can't see it, I don't think, a big belly like mine. I'm trying to hide it. So again, what work can we do? Let's hear from you.
I would like to point out that I'm from the South, and racism is hidden in the North. It's not hidden in the South. You know when someone's racist down there. I had an African-American professor say that he would rather live in the South because you know who's racist. So when I moved up here and I went to Mass Art, one of the first questions I asked myself was, where are your Black people? And I realized they were in Mission Hill, Mattapan, Lawrence. And that was very different for me. And so I think, you know, at Fitchburg State, I don't see the racism because it is hidden. So it's important for us to listen and hear the stories because it is so hidden. That's it.
And if I can piggyback on that a little bit, Andrea, thank you for sharing that. I think sometimes rather than hidden, it's almost like an undercurrent, you know, and if we're not careful, we really miss it. And I think a lot of people are sort of floating around on the surface, not realizing that it's there. It's always there. And our students are feeling it, and our faculty of color are feeling it. And it can be so subtle, and it's hard up here. And, you know, our students want faculty who look like them. And, you know, we try to hire faculty from all sorts of diverse backgrounds. And it's hard because they just don't show up in the application pool. I have many dear friends that I've tried to encourage to apply when we've had positions open, and they tell me over and over again, why would I do that to myself? Why would I come to New England? So.
I'll just share, Andrea, that I shared earlier in the first conversation that we had, that I'm from Missouri, the Show Me State, and not quite the South. I say that we're Midwest. Some may say that we're in the South. We're not. But you knew exactly where folks were coming from. You didn't have to guess. You didn't have to wonder, right? So although it was Missouri, the Confederate flag flew proudly very often, right? And so there was no question as I drove by that person, as that person drove by me, where they came from. And I was fine with that, right? Because one of the most hurtful, harmful things is to carry this weight, this burden of, are you ally or foe? Are you friend or foe? Did I receive this grade in this class because of my race or because of my performance? Did the person serving me at the Macy's really not see me? Is that why he picked the white person before me when I was clearly standing there before that person? These are difficult questions for us to ask. And so I really appreciate you bringing up the hidden nature of some of these challenges. I also want to lift up a comment that was made in the chat too around the system working the way that it was supposed / designed to work? So how do we all engage ourselves to this question as one who will challenge even then the system? How does the system operate in our lives? How does it operate in our offices? How does it operate on our campus? Right? So how do we interrogate the role of the system, and what are we doing to deconstruct, if not destroy, the system through this question around challenging ourselves, the institution, and broader society to make the campus community a safer, more inclusive environment?
Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm Jeanette Robichaud, and I work in the Grant Center, and I'm fairly new to the FSU community. I've been here about 10 months, but when I think about what it is that we're doing, one of the first projects that I had the privilege to work on was the pre-proposal to a funder for an inclusive excellence grant project. And I was able to work with a team from Biochem, but also, others. Dr. Day was on the team, and it was born from that cultural climate survey and the frustration that so many of our faculty were having around how to address these issues. And as a new employee, I just thought to myself, wow, this is really great work that at least they're trying to do, right? And, the proposal that we ended up with, and oftentimes there were, 15, 20 of us in the room kind of just hashing out what inclusive excellence would look like for the community. And it was, I just thought it was pretty empowering, and the proposal is still in there where it's gotten postponed because of COVID-19 in terms of what they're going to do with it. But, we were looking at it again. So the group continues to work through the summer to look at other ways that we could fund this work if the other HHMI doesn't continue. And we just reviewed, some of what we had done, and it's good work about recognizing where everybody comes from and what we need as faculty and staff. And it was funny because we talked about the fact that this is not just a faculty issue; it's an entire campus-wide staff issue, right? That we all need training, and so we talked about cohorts and stuff. So I just want to lift up some of the stuff that has been done and say I'm proud of the group, that so many are on this call. And as a new person on staff, I just think that this is good work that the university is trying to do. And at least we're trying. And so that's what I want to say.
Thank you for sharing that, Jeanette. I think it's very important, again, to lift up the work that we're already doing and to say, you know what, we're going to double down on this work because we understand its importance and its value to our community. And the only thing I would add is share the good news, share the good news, share the good news. So as a son of a Baptist preacher, you have to tell the gospel, right? So you have to share the good news that you're doing, because again, if you don't share the good news, even your supervisor might evaluate you and say, well, Jeanette never shared any great work that her team was doing, so I guess I didn't do any great work, right? So much of what you're doing is being done in a way that no one knows about it. So please, especially as it regards this particular issue, become your best cheerleader. Share the work that you've done already, the work that you're doing in community with faculty, in community with staff, across the university community, and invite others to join in that work, because if they're not being asked to join, they won't join, right? And they may not know. So thank you for sharing how you've challenged both yourself, the institution, in an effort to challenge the broader society to make FSU a better community. I am snapping all afternoon, given the great work that's being done in the chat. So again, please take a look to your right to see all the work that you're doing on your campus.
I would like to pose a question to the community, if I may. If you had to list the most important thing that you, personally and professionally, like whoever wants to respond in the conversation, think that we need to work on at Fitchburg State University. If I force you to pick one thing, which you will not ultimately have to because we will be doing many things, what is your highest priority?
Well, mine isn't a voice that needs to be centered here, but just maybe if we're getting a ball rolling, I think it is the priority to see if we can create an institutional mechanism by which the voices of people who are often targeted and silenced can be safely solicited in order actively to make policy, not just heard, but acted on in a institutionalized, concrete way.
Dr. Bayless, thank you for asking that question. And you can see in the chat all the responses there. And so I think it's interesting. I want to look this up as well. In my early work, I had this thesis that 18 is greater than 4. And then I flipped it and I said, no, 4 is greater than 18. Well, what's this fuzzy math, Carl? It's simply this. Before your students arrive at Fitchburg State, they've had 16, 17, 18 years of experience with racism, white supremacy, white privilege, you name it. How do you use those 4 years to create some cognitive dissonance to turn some of that stuff on its head? How do you interrupt and be proud to do so, right? And so oftentimes we beat ourselves up. And judging from the chat, yes, there's some work that we need to do, but at the same time, this is a monumental task that we're asking ourselves to do. We're asking to take students from all over the country who come to Fitchburg, Massachusetts, from their various communities. That shouldn't be smooth. That won't be smooth. We should know and understand that there'll be bumps along the way. And so this is another challenge for us, right? How do we smooth out those bumps? Or better yet, how do we encourage students, staff, and faculty to anticipate the bumps and to call it out, right? And to feel free to do so. Reading in the chat, I didn't read it fully, so forgive me for misremembering the conversation. A Black employee basically burning bridges between the university and one of its stakeholders because the stakeholder was believed by this employee to be racist. How do we manage that? And how do Black, brown, and other employees at the university, staff employees, non-tenured employees, create a space at the university that is safe, where they can share? Transparency, share successes. Tell Fitchburg, Massachusetts what we're doing at the university around this idea of racial justice. How do we engage community partners? Perhaps some of those phenomenal employees that we're looking for are right there in Fitchburg, right? To challenge the system, this is coming again from the forum. I'd like for us to try to move beyond the idea and language of diversity and inclusion, right? So again, the chat is being saved and recorded. So we're going to have a very rich transcript here. I love data. This is qualitative data that we can all use. And to the point that was made to Dr. Bayless's question around what is your number one priority, let's be transparent in sharing the transcript of the conversation, if we can, right? And where we can't, let's communicate with the community around why we can't, right? Because again, it's not that you have to tell everything, it's you have to communicate. And what we're hearing from the chat is we've not communicated, right? What other steps are we willing to take to challenge ourselves in a daily, everyday way, right? How do we become at FSU community to all? How do folks begin to see me as a member of this community as open to everyone? No matter your racial background, no matter your first-gen status, no matter your alumni, parent status, none of that. How do we create offices from individuals that are open, creative, thoughtful, and well known across the campus as willing to do the hard work, to answer the tough questions?
I'll speak up.
Please.
I'd like to take off of what Dr. Bayless said earlier about slowing down and creating authentic relationships and really getting to truly know people. I think is going to be a real powerful tool, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word. Powerful step, that's a better, in us in creating those spaces and those opportunities to learn from each other and better be a stronger community. So I think, again, Dan, authentic relationships, taking the time to build them.
It's very difficult to be vulnerable. You know, I've heard that word a lot. I'm not sure vulnerable is the right word. I think open. You know, on one hand, we're told don't get too close to the students. On the other hand, hey, get close to the students. It's a balance every day. You know, really, before I walk into class every day, I do say a prayer. And the first thing I say is hold your temper, because, you know, I've got 20 students. Each one of them has their own agenda coming to the table. I've got family. I've, you know, so much going on, but I just check myself. And I do say, you know, be good, be good, be good. I think education is key. So I know how to be better than good. And then with my own self, just being vulnerable to knowing that I'm not perfect, that I've got to try harder every day, to recognize things that I might not have recognized in the past. It is hard to be vulnerable, especially as a woman, when I walk into the classroom. I typically have my shoulders back and my head held high and ready to go. So I don't know if you have any comments on that. I just think being open is a better word.
Hi, this is Shomi. If I may jump in for a minute, I wanted to make a comment. I really appreciate the comments that I've heard also from our friend Andrea. I applaud her openness here. I wanted to make a comment about the idea of diversity. Now, like many others, I have stayed in various parts of the globe. And if you have a group of graduate students sitting together around a table, and we talk about diversity, we are talking about diversity of ways of thinking, of viewpoints, not the color of the skin, which is, you know, to me, I find that's a valid way of looking at it too. But if you're in an academic setting and all that you're thinking of when you say the word diversity is the color of the skin, perhaps that is a reflection on us, you know, on the institutions. I just wanted to put it out there. And I appreciate all the comments here. Okay.
We have a few minutes left, and looking at the chat, I'm remembering now that our students are tired. And I've had my own students say to me, it's difficult to be an activist and a student. And it is. So I would encourage our leaders to think about what actionable steps, as our student trustee has asked us to think about, we might take as leaders to challenge ourselves, the institution, and the community. And at the same time, say to our students, yeah, we're tired too. We're tired too. Because again, we've been dealing with this, not all of us, but all of us have been dealing with this forever. And it seems insurmountable. It seems as though we're not making any headway. We have to be hopeful that we are. We have to be hopeful that we are. Because we are. The question earlier about making progress, 150 years ago, we wouldn't have had this conversation, especially in this way. The women that are here wouldn't be here. The folks of color that are here wouldn't be here. And it's important to be mindful, yes, of the bar against which you measure yourself. But I'm telling you, as big and beautiful as Boston College believes itself to be, we are not having this conversation in this way. And so, yes, pat yourself on the back briefly, and then get to work, because you must change what people see when they see Fitchburg, or what they think when they hear Fitchburg. And it's you on the call right now that has the power to change it. And so what are you going to do to challenge yourself? Oh, I love this. Pardon this. I see someone just like me, an introvert. Yes, I agree. I agree. Yes, 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 and yes. Please read the comment in the chat, right? Oftentimes when I don't have anything to say, my dad did me a disservice. He said to me, son, it's best to be thought of as a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. So in those moments that I'm quiet, it's that I don't know what to say. And I have that fear of opening my mouth and making a mistake and hurting someone, right? And so it's an opportunity for us to really think and to be reflective. There's a real value and beauty in reflection. Thinking about your days as, yes, it is. Thinking about your days as an undergraduate even. Putting yourself in the shoes of your current students. Many of you were activists as students. Tell your students about that. Tell your students about how frustrated you were as a student activist when administrators simply waited until you graduated or weren't immediately responsive to your concerns. And know at the same time that you're planting some very important seeds that will grow, but they won't grow without water. And so the next work is your little water jug brought to your office, pouring it out onto the seeds that you're planting right now. I've seen rumor of conversation number 4, right? As the provost has already said, this conversation started a long time ago. This isn't the beginning. It will continue. You don't have to be invited to the conversation. Just join. You're already invited. There's an open invitation. There's work to be done. And where you want there to be work done, it's your responsibility. Students, staff, faculty, tenured or not, senior administrators, alumni, whomever, to make that work be known in that way that it is appropriate and safe for you to do so. A few more minutes. Again, please share a commitment that you're willing to make. You can share it in the chat or with us over the conversation.
If I may jump in, I think this has been an amazing conversation, and we had agreed with the planning group to conclude with the various members of the leadership team to conclude with some comments. And first of all, let me just say that Carl, we can't thank you enough for being, and to Dr. Lapides's point, you will be back again in some way. But yesterday, it seemed like a great idea for the leadership to try to conclude and wrap up. Right now, I'm not sure it's such a good idea because there is so much that has been said that is a challenge to try to do that. And I'll just speak partially on behalf of the academic affairs, and say, in the words of Paulo Freire, You know, and he would have said it in Brazilian. I will say it in Portuguese. I'll say it in Spanish. Educar es liberar, y la educación es un acto de amor. Education is to liberate, and education is an act of love. I can't imagine two things that are more needed today than both liberation and love. So you have the commitment from all of us, but I'll speak on behalf of the Academic Affairs, to continue to do this work. I love that two words that came out at the end: intentionality and water the seeds. So many times we come to meetings, we come to our committees, and we leave so enthusiastic of the work we're going to do, and we get to our desks, and all of a sudden there are 15 other emails that we have to address, and this work that is so important falls. And you have my commitment, at least, to make sure that it doesn't fall off, doesn't come to that bottom of that stack. And to the point that I think, Carl, you made at the end, this conversation is open to all. And while it doesn't always have to be the students of color and the faculty and staff, anybody, please remind the institution not to forget this. It can just be a check-in of what is it that you're doing. We said we were going to go do this. It's not that we don't want to. Sometimes we forget. So make us keep that, live in the moment, and continue that. So that's our commitment. I cannot express gratitude to everybody enough, to everybody that all the comments, both spoken and written. So thank you. Now I think I'll pass it on to Jess, who was going to also say a few words.
You know, I think I echo Rich, is when you come after such eloquent and articulate speakers, it is challenging to summarize. So I will be very brief in my statement. When I say thank you, I thank you all just to the commitment of conversation, and the university administration team, and to Dr. Bell, I thank you all for just reflecting on the conversation and being part of it. I know that when Mr. Bryce shared being an introvert, because he and I are so different, I'm very extroverted, but I feel the emotion and the conversation and how it sits and how I can reflect as an administrator at the university. And so my commitment, and I know I can speak for the other administrators, is we are here and we are listening. And I know it is a burden to a lot of folks, but please know that this is not the last of our conversations. And as Dr. Cardea, I know all of you will continue to remind us, and that is so important. I just want to thank everyone for respectfully sharing their thoughts. There's no wrong answers ever. It is just a way for us to learn more. And so I feel that everyone was very courageous today in speaking their truths. And I just want to say thank you on behalf of our team, and just know that we are reflecting on all the conversations, and that as we agreed with our working group, that we will have actionable items sent out to staff and students and faculty in July. And then we have a lot of long-term planning to do, and we are committed to that work. So thank you for just giving me a moment of your time, and we're just very appreciative of everyone. So thank you. I guess with that said, I'm going to say that this is good evening, and we're not too far past 5:03. So I think we did a really good job. And so just thanks, everyone. And we'll talk to all of you very soon. And thank you, Dr. Bell, again for being here. We will definitely have you back. So good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.